Hello, Professor Max Hilz, and welcome to the 8th European Congress of Neurorehabilitation. This European Congress of Neurorehabilitation brings together the scientific and clinical communities. What do you believe is the unique role that it plays in bridging the gap between research and daily patient care in neurorehabilitation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think it is extremely important to have this conference because it builds a link between the many different subspecialties that exist in neurology and in neurorehabilitation, and the neurorehab work itself. So there are so many aspects like genetics, immunology. My field is the autonomic nervous system, and they all play an important role in rehabilitation processes. And this conference, according to my feelings and perception, really tries to address all these different important aspects, including aspects I, as a primarily neurologist, am not even that aware of, like augmented reality. That was just one of the presentations we heard this morning, which opens completely new doors for patients with movement disorders, with deficits regarding the situation after a stroke. And these are very new concepts, or at least new for me, that really advance the field, including music therapy, which is a field where we did also some work on the autonomic nervous system effects of music therapy, and not on the effects in neurorehabilitation, which are very, very promising. So there is a whole array of aspects that's covered in this conference, and that's what makes it so interesting and links science to the direct patient needs. And that's, of course, of utmost importance, because all the science would be l'art pour l'art unless the patients benefit from this work.
Considering your medical specialty, are there any other future developments that you envision for the complex multidisciplinary field of neurorehabilitation?
Well, the autonomic nervous system interacts with all bodily functions, and unfortunately, not very much autonomic research has so far been implemented in neurorehabilitation, because too many of our colleagues assume that the field is very complicated, that you need expensive equipment, and it is very important to familiarize colleagues with the basic concepts of clinical autonomic research, to introduce technologies that are not that difficult and still give us a very prominent insight into the status of autonomic nervous system function, or in the course of a disease dysfunction, and then the further follow-up steps, either the status progresses and deteriorates, or there is an improvement. For example, after stroke, we did studies where we saw immediately after the onset of stroke, within the first 24 hours, significant dysfunction of cardiovascular autonomic function, which correlates with the stroke severity and also correlates with the compromised function of specific brain regions. And then with recovery, with rehabilitation, these parameters can improve. If they do not improve, this could be a high risk of continuous further secondary strokes, which of course deteriorates the prognosis of the patient. So these parameters should be implemented in rehabilitation medicine, and there is so much more that can be done. Just think about the significant amount of bladder dysfunction in patients who need neurorehabilitation, be it due to multiple sclerosis, stroke, to radiculopathies, etc. And this needs to be evaluated by autonomic examination. And this examination is very straightforward and quite simple to learn. So I hope that all these aspects can be implemented. I just mentioned a few of them, but there's far more that could be implemented in order to better diagnose the status of a patient and then work on the improvement.
And from your perspective, what is challenging future development in neurorehabilitation that the ECNR can help?
Well, there are many very challenging tasks. One task is perhaps just to pick an example, improvement of motor function after a stroke. One of my friends who is also at this conference, Professor Wayne Feng from Duke University, he uses repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation to enhance motor function recovery and many other functions. And I think this is a promising field which can in the future add much more to rehabilitation of post-stroke patients. Another option is vagus nerve stimulation, which can be performed non-invasively. There are now first studies showing that motor function after a brachiofacial hemiparesis can be improved if you apply adequate transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation. And there are definitely many other aspects which are exciting and which deserve further research and clinical application to the benefit of the patients.
All right, so you think that the ECNR can support research or maybe advocacy for certain topics, or what do you think that the biggest role the Federation can play in?
Well, the most important part, I mean, financing research is a huge task, and I don't think it should be the task of a clinical and research society like this one. But the most, in my view, most stimulating part of such a congress and such a society is the interaction of researchers who, unless they meet at such a conference, don't even know that there is another group that pursues a similar goal, that there is an overlap between ongoing projects which could trigger mutually fruitful cooperation, which could give rise to joint studies, to enhancing protocols. If I may refer to some of my own studies, at conferences I sometimes met people with whom I had a conversation during coffee break or during the dinner, and it was a stimulating exchange of ideas which in the end triggered new research projects which somehow unraveled the Gordian knot. I don't think it makes sense to take a sword and cut the Gordian knot into two pieces. That's not the solution. We have to come together to unravel problems. Science is far more complicated than solutions that are considered heroic in history. We cannot just say, okay, we don't have a solution, we ignore the problem. We have to untangle all these complicated and intricate problems, and that's what such a society will be able to advance, by exchanging ideas, by bringing together people, and by allowing them to exchange ideas, and by exchanging them, creating new thoughts, having new insights.
Your pioneering work and your presentation today focus on autonomic nervous system. How can a deeper understanding of autonomic regulation, for instance after a stroke, transform our neurorehabilitation strategies and improve long-term patient outcomes?
Well, first of all, so far, in my perception, rather little autonomic nervous system research and clinical evaluation is performed in neurorehabilitation patients. However, when you just look at the cardiovascular autonomic control, which is all controlled by the so-called central autonomic network that is located throughout the brain, and many centers are in the brain stem, but many other areas, insular cortex, frontal cortex, anterior cingulate gyrus, they're all interconnected. And when you have a dysfunction after a stroke, or in patients who have multiple sclerosis, or after a brain injury, or in patients who have epilepsy, when you have a dysfunction in these areas, it puts the patients at risk. It not only compromises normal organ function, normal cardiovascular function, bladder function, gastrointestinal function. They cannot control their body temperature adequately. They are not sweating or profusely sweating. And this is, of course, a major limitation of their quality of life. And if this can be implemented in rehabilitation, where you assess the status and then follow up on the status, it allows us to improve the patient outcome and also the patient's quality of life. And that's one of the big challenges to train experts in neurorehabilitation in understanding autonomic evaluation, autonomic nervous system function and dysfunction.
Right. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the interview.
My pleasure. Thank you.